What is up, everybody? Welcome to the second part of this Copa America preview series. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel, including the other two parts of the Copa America preview. This second part, all about storylines, the biggest kind of topics, themes to be looking out for in this tournament. First, World Cup preparation. Because you have the three best teams in CONCACAF combining to host the World Cup collectively. The US, and Mexico are not participating in World Cup qualifying. It is also very difficult for CONCACAF teams to get high-level friendlies against South American, European opposition because of how intense CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying is, because of the fact that you have a Nations League in UEFA, so basically all of those windows are taken up. There just aren't very many opportunities between now and the summer of 2026 to face the kind of teams you're going to be facing in a round of 16 and a quarterfinal at a World Cup. The kind of teams that these three nations are trying to compete against and be able to ultimately beat. So this is your glorious opportunity. It's a tournament to simulate that part of the World Cup as well. Of course, there are a lot of things that are going to change in the next 2 years. But this is the best data points we're going to have on these three nations and where they are relative to some of the best teams in the world and the kind of teams that they seem to be pretty close to, and you don't know, is the fourth best team in CONMEBOL better than the best team in CONCACAF? Those kind of things we're going to get at least some reference point for here. So, especially for the US, where does this team stack up? Canada, Mexico, coming off of disappointing World Cups, can they bounce back and kind of start to build momentum for 2026? Number two, and I feel like this might not get discussed as much as it should, the managerial storylines in this tournament are fascinating. Let's start with Greg Berhalter. A significant portion of the US fan base wants him fired. If he does not perform well in this tournament, he very well may be fired. And you also just have the idea of he was temporarily removed, then got his job back. There's just a lot going on here. Then, one of the people who many, including myself, thought should have had the job that Berhalter has, and is a U.S. international, and has been openly criticizing Berhalter, is now managing Canada in Jesse Marsch. That's layer two. And just to round it off again, talking about these three CONCACAF teams, also you've got Jaime Lozano at Mexico. All kinds of pressure because it's Mexico, because things haven't been going very well. A good tournament, a good showing here would do a lot for him as well. So, and Jesse Marsch making his, essentially what's his Canada debut. I mean, I know they've played a couple games at this point, but we're going to see what they look like in a tournament too. So all kinds of interesting stuff going on in CONCACAF. Then we go to the CONMEBOL side of this. Lionel Scaloni at Argentina just won a World Cup and has openly suggested at times that he might just step down at some point. That seems to have quieted recently, but is he going to continue through 2026? Does this tournament have some kind of bearing on that? If it goes well or doesn't go well, does he rethink some things? Then let's go from Argentina to Brazil. Dorival Jr.'s first major tournament. You've got legends saying this Brazil team is one of the worst, and all kinds of pressure and criticism. and Dorval's just got there. But also, you're expected to win this tournament. And then you can't talk about managers without talking about Marcelo Bielsa, too. I'm fascinated to see what this is going to look like. What can he do with this Uruguay squad? The idea of him getting to manage Darwin Nunez is amazing. That's just chaos and chaos, which is a beautiful thing. I cannot wait to see what this looks like against high-level opposition in a tournament setting. Number 3, the South American hierarchy. 1 and 2 are Argentina and Brazil. You can debate between them. It'll change from time to time depending on where those two teams are. And then you've got Colombia and Uruguay right now, who are a clear 3 and 4. Again, you can pick and choose between them. That's not the conversation I want to have here. But it's those 4 teams, and then there's this jumbled mess. It used to be that Chile was kind of that 5th team, and oftentimes even better than 5th. And so you kind of had a top 5, and then you had everybody else. That's not really the case here. There are a bunch of teams that are really close to each other. I mean, Bolivia's at the bottom of the hierarchy for CONMEBOL. But other than that, where teams ended up getting drawn could have a huge bearing on how they do in this tournament. Somebody's probably going to surprise us. Who is it? And then also just heading into a 2026 qualifying campaign, can somebody build some momentum and some confidence and really kind of establish themselves as the best of the rest in this tournament? So that's something I'm looking for as well. And also just trying to figure out, how do we actually feel about all of these teams at this point in time and kind of heading into 2026, looking ahead to the World Cup? Expanded field, because there's just, from a talent perspective, there's not much to separate that middle group of teams in CONMEBOL. So maybe we can learn some important information in this tournament about that. Then you have the other part of the conversation, which is the Brazil-Argentina part of this. Argentina won the last Copa America. Argentina obviously won the last World Cup. Brazil have not been very successful winning tournaments. And of course, there's the narrative about Brazil struggling against European squads and World Cups. That's something separate. But even that, they're not dominating Copa America recently either. So it's not just a World Cup against European opposition thing. If Brazil don't win this one, and Argentina do, especially if Argentina don't win without having to beat Brazil in the final, it might be time to just reevaluate all of this. Because it's tournaments. I don't put too much stock into that. I still believe Brazil are a better team than Argentina, and I don't really have to think twice about that. One hard-fought game in a Copa America final and a World Cup that could have gone any number of... what happens if Argentina loses the penalty shootout to the Dutch? That, to me, doesn't say too much about where these two teams are in relation to each other. But if this goes lopsided in favor of Argentina, or Argentina win the final against Brazil 3-0 or something like that, then we got to start asking some, and those questions are already, to a certain extent, being asked by at least some people with relation to Brazil. But they got to deliver in this tournament, or else they are behind Argentina and trying to catch up. It doesn't matter how good that squad is. It doesn't matter how many incredible names they have on it. They have got to perform and deliver. They should win this tournament. Do they actually follow through on that and kind of restore themselves to the top of CONMEBOL? The fifth thing here. How does the dynamic of the younger teams versus the veterans work in this tournament? It probably isn't going to determine who wins it or anything, because this isn't necessarily about Brazil and Argentina. However, you do have a player on each of those teams, Alejandro Garnacho for Argentina, Endrick for Brazil, who are entering this conversation with all of these established players. One of them could end up making a huge difference, delivering that one moment that decides the final. Maybe not quite that high stakes, wins a group stage game, something like that. But I'm more looking at teams, specifically Mexico, who have really turned a page with this Copa America squad. A lot of those regulars that you expect are not there. How do they fare? Versus, and you can throw the U.S. into this as well, with all of the young players on that team, as experienced as they are at this point, versus a Salomon Rondon, an Alexis Sanchez, an Enner Valencia, a Luis Suarez. There are some of the other teams in this tournament, specifically kind of in the middle of teams that could definitely make it to the knockout stage. You could see finishing second in their groups that you wouldn't necessarily pick to win the group, but could pull an upset if things go right. And even Angel Di Maria you can throw into this mix too. You have a lot of teams who are still reliant on veteran players who at one point were pretty high profile names, but aren't the same players at this point. Does one of those guys have a great tournament, kind of a resurgence, looks like their old selves again, or is this kind of the passing of the torch to the next generation where the teams that have that youthful energy, have the legs, the fresh perspective, kind of take control of this tournament in terms of the teams getting to the knockout stage, the teams getting to the semifinal, things like that. So those are my 5 storylines for Copa America. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.